Dang. I mean, I wouldn't have passed that up either, man. That's a heck of a deal.
I mean, yeah, it is crazy. I mean, they were so cheap, you know, how could you kind of turn it down with the sale? And sure, it's like airsoft quality, but honestly, it's just as good.
Honestly, just as good. It was on sale. Airsoft quality. It's the same thing. Definitely good enough.
When is your gear good enough? When is your rifle good enough? The optic, the sling, or even that $200 little M-LOK attachment you saw on Instagram at 2 a.m.?
When it comes to life-saving equipment, is anything ever really good enough? I mean, after all, at the end of the day, isn't this life or death? Well, here's the truth. At some point, it has to be good enough because guns and rifles and tactical kit and all of that stuff is just one piece of the preparedness pie. And most of us are not swimming in doomsday trust fund baby type money.
So today we're going piece by piece through the tactical preparedness world and analyzing what is actually good enough and where it starts to tip over into just tactical cosplay.
Hard point the target, builder. We got him 30 anyways.
Now, should your aim be to settle and buy the lowest tier possible? No, that's not what we're saying at all. But if you're spending money on super high-end Gucci gear without having all of your other needs met, you're really spending money on something like a Ferrari spoiler and bolting it onto a PT Cruiser with 3 flat tires and no spare in the trunk.
I mean, we've all seen it. Some of us have even been it, you know, dudes rocking $15,000 night vision rigs and Gucci kit and, you know, IR lasers that can signal to Mars. But back at home, we only have 4 days worth of food in the pantry, and we think that a Brita water pitcher is our water plan if things go sideways. So if that's you or someone you know, listen up, because all the high-speed gear in the world doesn't matter if the rest of your preps are an absolute dumpster fire.
This is fine. I'm okay with the events that are unfolding currently.
So before you go out and buy another rifle or upgrade your sling, which you already upgraded last month, make sure that you hit a few key priorities. And we've hit on some of these things before, but you really need to ask yourself, do I have enough water to not panic? Do I have enough food to not die? You see, every family in America should have a few key priorities that they hit the good enough category before they start investing more and more money into each other category. So you need to hit that baseline of good enough before you continue to go to the high performance, high tier level.
Water, security, food, mobility. The caveat is none of these should come at the expense of your family being in financial slavery. Let's say you've entirely maxed out your credit cards, but you still don't even own a concealed carry handgun. You may be asking yourself, well, what's another $500?
Don't talk to me about style, you're broke people.
Well, maybe instead of going over your limit, you should sell a tunic and buy a sword. It's literally in the Bible. Now, anytime this subject comes up, a lot of people are like, oh, well, if things get hard, I'm just going to scavenge or trade for supplies. That is not a plan. That is a plot line from The Road or The Walking Dead.
Now, we also need to ask good enough. Good enough for what, though? Are we talking about an active shooter, civil unrest, or total societal collapse? Because each of those categories is going to be answered differently depending on who it is that you're talking to. And maybe you're like us and you think that civilians should have all of the capabilities that the US government is able to employ overseas or here at home. We simply think that we need to be the check and balance that our founding fathers put in place for the citizenry to be. Additionally, it's important for us to keep that torch lit in order to pass on to future generations that may be living in more difficult or more confusing times than we're living in right now. But if our only purpose is to deal with an active shooter situation at church on Sunday morning, then our gear really only needs to reflect that level of capability. You don't need gear that is good enough for Instagram clout. You need gear that actually fits your life needs. You need to answer that question for yourself and stop spending money there, period.
So with that survival pep talk out of the way, let's actually get into the gear and figure out what is worth spending your money on and what is just superfluous tactical FOMO. And just to be clear, there's nothing wrong with superfluous tactical FOMO as long as it's not coming at the expense of all the other things.
Guys, we got to take just a second to thank some of the sponsors that make content possible for you guys for free on YouTube every single week. So first and foremost, Steel Industries. Now, does night vision or lasers or any of these other accessories actually fall into the good enough category? They absolutely can. It just depends on what it is that you're doing. And we'll get more into that in depth later on in the video, but if you're looking for quality night vision at an affordable price, you need to go check out Steel Industries. Their customer service team is second to none. So if you have any questions before or after you buy, make sure you hit them up. They're a really good team selling quality products.
Speaking of quality products, Wetworks, we've been using their nylon for quite some time now. Not only are they good quality, but they're actually very affordable. So this super slick rig, which has become our go-to plate carrier, it's only like 130 bucks, and it has held up very well. And we've been pretty brutal on these and poured blood all over them and got dust and dirt and drug them around everywhere. They're legit. So if you're looking for an affordable plate carrier to get good enough in the armor category, check out Wetworks. They're legit.
Finally, guys, we have the DOS boot, which is a +2 mag extension designed to go onto 20 rounders, but you could put them on 30s or even 40s. These come from none other than Dye Free Co.
They're actually pretty good.
Yeah, they actually are. Now, one of the best upsides is the fact that it is rounded on the bottom. So if you are trying to get a different angle while you're shooting, the bottom of the magazine is not going to cause you to be barely rocking up on just one of the lips of the mag. They come in a 3-pack, and the cost is still yet to be determined because we were filming this before these have actually come out. So hit the link in the description, go check out how much they cost. Knowing Dye Free Co., they're going to be a competitive price point. And with the little bit of shooting that I have done with them, I do like them a lot. They do not change the reliability of the PMag, so +2 extra rounds and the added benefit of stable shooting. Links in the description for all these brands, and with that, let's get back to the video. Let's kick it off with something fun. Let's begin with rifles. So what is good enough when it comes to a carbine? Well, you kind of need to start by asking, what are you doing with it? For us, we view these not as hunting tools, but as personal security or personal protection devices of some kind. So the barrel length and the optic magnification or whatever else is probably going to fit your personal needs. Now, Drew and I are blessed to work in the industry, and so we do run around with some fairly nice stuff because we either get things at discounts or we get stuff for free. So don't think that we only shoot the Gucciest stuff. No, we still love really good quality guns like this. So as a great example, Drew has a Shorty 10.3 BCM upper.
11.5?
11.5 upper, that's what I said. What's an inch? Now BCM, whether you're buying it used or new, is it hits a category where you get a lot for the dollar amount. Now for all of these categories, I'm sure you can relate to whether it's guns or cameras or anything else that you're into. If you double your money and you go from a BCM and you spend double the price point for just an upper like that, let's say it's $800 with the bolt carrier group and charging handle. If you spend $1,600, are you getting double the performance? No, not necessarily. You may be getting 10 or 20% better performance, and you'll see that as we kind of talk through some of these guns. So a roughly $800 upper, and then moving back, you may assume, oh, that's a super expensive $3,000 end gall, but it's not. Drew, tell them what this actually is.
It's basically an airsoft version of it, but it's a good airsoft version of it. 4MR Ranch has done some incredible reviews on this particular unit, and in our experience, it's worked pretty well. Is it just as good? No, but is it good enough for what we do? Absolutely. And what Josh said about upgrading your rifle and doubling your money and hoping you get double the performance, there are so many items within this space where once you hit kind of good enough, you have diminishing returns as far as what your money is getting you for performance. So unless it's something that you're super passionate about, unless shooting rifles and training is something you're doing, at least once a week, if not 2 or 3 times a week, or every single day with dry fire, then I would say going above the level of a BCM or the price of a BCM is probably not the wisest decision unless you just got money to throw around.
Yep, exactly. And that's not to say that BCM is lower quality. It's just that what you get for the price point is amazing. So this optic, the Aimpoint RDS, comes in at $500 with the mount, with the caps and everything. So when you compare it to something like an Aimpoint T2 with a ScalarWorks mount, super Gucci, really nice, it's about $1,000. So again, you're doubling your money. Whereas some of the features like I need to push buttons as opposed to rotate a knob to get my brightness settings, one is a little bit nicer and easier to do with gloves on, but all things considered, for 500 bucks, you're still getting Aimpoint quality red dot with the mount, and yes, it works very, very well.
I would even say that certain Holosun models are good enough. I mean, I've had Holosuns for years with tens of thousands of rounds on them, and they've held up pretty well. So like, again, it just goes to your use case. How often are you using this? How much is this like your way of life? And based on that, you can decide, do I want something like a Holosun? Should I bump something up to like a mid-level aim point, which is like, touching that Gucci category, but it's not actually all the way up there? Or do I want to invest in something that will literally last me the rest of my life, like an Aimpoint T2 or something like that?
Yeah, and then there's another side of the conversation, which you could, here's a great example of it, same as the Aimpoint. When you're looking at a more budget-friendly option, whether it's optics or helmets or anything else, do you go the highest dollar amount from an entry-level company, or do you go the more entry-level price point for a Gucci company? Great example, the Leupold Mk4. So Leupold is known for really high quality, but also the Leupold Mk5 that I run around with, that whole rig is about $3,000 with all the accessories that I have on there. Whereas this Leupold Mk4 is a 1:4 with a 30mm mount. I have an exposed top turret with fine adjustments at 0.1 mil radian. You get a lot out of it for $1,000, and then you get a mount for $100 or maybe a few dollars more. And for, let's say, $1,200, you're still getting a 1:4 with a crisp reticle, shake awake red dot. When you pick that gun up, the dot just automatically turns on. So I tend to prefer buying a high quality, high tier brand, but at that entry level price point. Again, same goes for the Aimpoint. Now, another really cool way that you can go is saving money on things like a magnifier. As long as the magnifier works and holds 0, like this one from SIG, this is their Juliet. It comes in at about $170. It works, to my eye, just as good, that's actually true, as one of the EOTech G33s. Now, some people like magnifiers, some people don't. I'm not the biggest fan of them because you get multiple panes of glass. There's a lot of things that can be messed up in there when it's foggy or rainy, but I digress. For $170 behind a $500 red dot, you're getting very competitive performance for significantly less money. Lastly, on this rifle that I put together, when it comes to lights, you can spend $300 plus on just the light body without even getting into some of the pressure pads or tail cap accessories. And people have talked about this ad nauseum on YouTube and around every gun store in America, but Streamlight, for the money, is amazing.
Yep.
Yes, there are better lights out there that give you 10, 20, 30% better performance, but for $150 or even $100 if you're buying something used, Streamlight products, they do work, and they have held up for both of us for many years.
So the first rifle I ever got was a Smith & Wesson M&P 15, and that was the rifle that I grew up like upgrading and learning how to use and training with. And I'm sure that I put at least 20,000 rounds on that thing, and by the time that I got rid of it, it was still functioning just like the day I bought it. I had a Streamlight ProTac 2L, I think, light on it with a super cheap mount. I had a Holosun red dot and just a really cheap sling, and all of those items, they were good enough for me and what I was doing at the time. To be honest, they're probably still good enough for me right now. I would not balk at having to use that gun every single day.
So for both Drew and I, we have about $800 in just the upper without the accessories, and the upper half of the gun really is the expensive part. But if you're looking to save some money, the lower is where you can really save some money. There's a lot of companies that have ambidextrous attachments and extended mag releases and so on and so on. There's nothing wrong with those. And if you're left-eye dominant, right-handed shooter, there are times where you need to spend money on some of those things. But all things considered, both Drew and I have bottom of the barrel. I have a PSA lower. He has an Anderson lower. They still function just fine. It is it's the housing that's holding all of the tools on the inside. So spending decent money on like BCM, lower parts kits, but saving money on the lower itself is a really good way to get the same performance and a good lifespan out of a tool like this without going overboard on cost.
I have a super cheap Anderson lower that has been on every Gucci rifle I've ever owned. Shoots the same.
Now, if you are buying some used components, there's a few things to pay attention to and swap out. And we kind of did a whole video on this, talking about what items go the fastest on ARs and Glocks and some tools that I keep around. So if you do buy an upper that's not new and you're just wanting to make sure that everything is right where it needs to be and as fresh as possible, your gas rings on your bolt, they start to wear out typically at about 5,000 rounds, especially if it's unsuppressed, 5,000 to 6,000 rounds. And then the buffer spring, that action spring is moving and compressing every single time you pull the trigger or you pull that bolt back. Upgrading the spring to something like a Spring Co. And again, refreshing those gas rings to either BCM or Spring Co. for those gas rings is going to put some new life back into the gun. It's not like changing out a whole barrel kind of cost, talking about like $30 at the most, but that really does help with reliability and performance.
All right, so handguns. When it comes to handguns, what is good enough? Well, let's start with the Gucci, right? Something like a Flux Raider with a super fancy agency slide. Do I love this thing? Absolutely. Do I have a ton of fun with it? Yes. Are there use cases for it? Absolutely, especially if you live in a place where you can't exactly get a rifle, but you can still run a handgun. Like, yes, there is a purpose for it. But is it just good enough? No, it is absolutely up there in the Gucci category. So by not owning something that's Gucci like this, are you missing out? You're missing out on fun. Absolutely. Like, I have a ton of fun shooting this thing. But when we bring it back down to reality and what is good enough, truly good enough, it's not this. It's not fancy slide upgrades. It's not crazy cuts on your slide or the stippling, although I do think stippling is a great upgrade for a handgun. It's just your basic stuff.
Yeah, so here we have 3 different categories that people would consider to be a budget, a good enough, and a Gucci category. Well, I'm here to tell you all 3 of these guns from the same manufacturer do the same thing. They take the same magazines and they have the same reliability. Now, there are some additional upgrades to some of these things like lights or better triggers or optics, but at the end of the day, you still have a responsibility to perform with a Glock. If you are carrying a Glock, your outcome should still be the same. Now, Drew made a really good point, which is if you treat it like a sport and you're trying to go from 10% capability to 90% capability, regardless what gun you are given, the first time you go shooting, you still need to grow to get to that 90% capability. So when we're talking about guns ranging from $700 with the holster all the way up to $2,000 plus for a Glock, I would say that having a stock Glock 19 or 17 is going to be that good enough category. And if you're worried about having a light on there, man, get yourself a good quality Streamlight. Again, Streamlight handheld, and dry fire till your hands are bleeding. No joke, that really is the way to start to make the performance happen. Because if I have a $700 Glock, I spend $300 on a red dot, that's still only giving me a percentage of capability, whereas me dry firing and getting better can get that 10% capability with the exact same gun. So what is good enough in the handgun world? A quality pistol with good iron sights and a good $100 holster. It's gonna get a lot of the issues of your handgun out of the way.
Just remember that in any skill set, when you're trying to master it, it's that last 2 to 3% towards mastery that take the vast majority of the time, or let's say 300 or 400% effort just to get 1 to 2% better. Upgrades for rifles and guns and even kit, you can kind of think about in the same way. There is a level at which it is absolutely acceptable. And if you genuinely care about it, and if you use it a lot, and if it's important to you, then it might be worth it to invest the extra money to get marginally better. But you're not going to go like leaps and bounds better than what was just good enough. Now, before we move on to the next level, we do need to say that medical is definitely one of those parts of like your level 1 good enough kit. And when it comes to the medical items themselves, do not skimp on them at all. Pay for good, reputable products from good, reputable brands. North American Rescue is who we get most of our stuff from, and some way to have that with you at all times. Maybe not like when you're going to get groceries, but at least in your vehicle. So for me, I just have a simple Rebel Raiders apothecary bag. I think these things are like, I think I bought it for like 45 bucks, 50 bucks. And inside here I have multiple tourniquets, I have chest seals. I know it sounds silly because it's like, oh, chest seals are only really good for gunfights. It's like, man, I grew up in Kentucky. Do you know how many times someone in our county was driving their four-wheeler and hit a buck and it punctured their lungs and like went clean through? Like,
or even just a stick.
Yeah, or even just a stick. Like, it happens a lot, especially in the country. So like chest seals, pressure bandages, gauze, a good pair of trauma shears, which I'll say the typical trauma shears that you get are absolute garbage. These X shears have been phenomenal. It is I mean, we've talked to other dudes in the medical field, like these are the ones to get We don't get any kickback from it. I'm just saying the normal ones are absolute garbage. Also, just a basic radio. You don't need a big like encrypted or a super special high terror radio or anything like that. We have those, but just a simple Baofeng or a Quenching, we've talked about these before, goes a very long way. And this is just a typical IFAC just packed into something I have with me all the time. This is absolutely good enough. But to get good enough in this category, do not skimp.
And you'll notice when we're talking about medical and the need for medical, we don't have any of these tied to kit. These are not wrapped around a big plate carrier or a chest rig or anything like that. And the reason for that is because this can go into any backpack. If I'm flying somewhere, the trauma shears can come out, but I can have medical with me. If I'm getting in my car, I know I have medical. If I'm going to the range, again, I know I have medical. It can go around my waist or in a backpack. Yeah, if you want to put medical onto kit of some kind down the road, that's great. But having a solution where it can go with you everywhere that you go, you and your family know what it is when they see it, that really is the basic level of everyone should have that taken care of before you continue to move on to some of the Gucci stuff.
Also splints and a boo-boo kit. I know a boo-boo kit sounds stupid, but like, dude, it gets used more than anything else. Heck, I think my kids like pretend to hurt themselves on purpose just so that they can get a Band-Aid. For all you dads out there, you know exactly what we're talking about.
So wrapping up guns, and before we get into kit, we do have to point out something that is very little talked about, which is the fuel for your own capability, the ammunition. And we'll throw in the magazines there as well. So if you find yourself spending significantly more money on optics and suppressors and muzzle devices and slings and all these other attachments, and don't get me wrong, cool stuff, but you are not putting a lot of time through your gun or through your equipment to get better yourself, then you are a collector and you are not a trainer. You are not working to be a better individual with the tools that you own. And I like collecting cool stuff as well, but for most of us, we're never going to outshoot the firearms that we own. My Glock outshoots me, I am the problem there. My $6,000 rifles outshoot me, I am not outshooting it, and the ammunition is what starts to get us 10%, 2% better every day we dry fire, or every day that we actually go out to the range and put some time in. So, how many magazines should you have before you can say, I have enough, I don't need to keep spending? I would say double a fighting loadout. So if a standard fighting loadout for an AR is 7 mags, 6 on you, 1 in the gun. So if you double that, that's a really good place to start and start prioritizing some of your categories. For ammunition, depends on how much you're shooting, but I would much rather be a friend of someone who has so much more ammunition and 1 or 2 ARs as opposed to the other way around. So how much ammunition should you have on hand? It's kind of a sticky question. I would say 2,000 rounds of fighting and 2,000 rounds at all times of training ammo for every caliber that you own is probably good enough. And yes, that's a lot of money, but that should help you reprioritize. Do I need to go from an Aimpoint $500 red dot to an Aimpoint T2? No, because I don't have that much ammunition on hand. That needs to become a priority first.
Now, everything that you just saw is good enough for today's problems, if I'm being completely honest. If you're worried about being secure and having personal protection for the problems of today, the worst of which may be something like an active shooter situation, you are good enough. You should not feel the need to go out and buy a plate carrier, an armor, and a chest rig, a helmet, night vision, sustainment gear, and a full like outdoor loadout for 3 days to a week at a time. You're good enough. But if you do feel that need to not just be prepared for the problems of today, but to also be prepared for the problems of tomorrow, and I use tomorrow as a blanket term for much worse scenarios, then you can start looking at things like this. Now, this is where we're at. Me and Josh and the dudes that run in our crew, we're very focused on the problems of tomorrow. We've got our problems of today checked off, squared away. It's something we have to revisit all the time and make sure we're staying up on, but we are passionate about the problems of tomorrow also. And if you do feel that urge, and it's a genuine urge, it's not just this is cool and I want it. If you feel like, hey, that is something that I want to make, normal for my family. I want to live that kind of lifestyle. I think it's important to keep that torch alive in all of my future generations, then yeah, it's time to look at stuff like that. Whenever it comes to kit, there are three major things that people tend to think about first: plate carriers, chest rigs, and belts. Let's start with belts. Where do you feel like that falls in terms of the priority of getting kit?
Yeah, when I first got into all of this stuff, I thought that belts were the answer to everything. I can throw just a belt on and I can have my pistol and I could have water on there and extra mags and medical, and the next thing I knew, I just couldn't move nearly as fast. So when you take that belt off and you move the weight and that equipment up to your chest, whether it's on a chest rig or a plate carrier, you're just increasing your mobility factor. Also the ability to sit down comfortably in a car. I'm not saying don't get a belt. There's definitely a time and a place for a belt, but it is not where I start when it comes to good enough gear and just the beginning levels of what do I need. Even today, I really like not having a belt. When we go do AMS, I don't think either of us wear a belt. If anything, it is nothing but a holster. So if I am wearing stuff on my waistline, what I much prefer to do is have a quality belt, a Safariland holster that just runs through my everyday agonic belt, and then maybe a magazine carrier or two that can go onto that belt. But I don't like having all of this extra weight and bulk if possible.
This is kind of a preference. We just think that belts are the least important piece of kit that you can possibly have. I mean, you can have this other kind of kit and still run an appendix holster. Like, it's not a problem, you just gotta get used to it and train with it. As far as belts go though, because they do have their place, what would be a good enough belt for kit?
So two options is you either go buy something used, like a good Vikings belt, or you get a quality leather belt that's sized up to go over your pants, and then your gun and holster come out of your EDC and go in here. So this is a good option. This is a Magpul Tejas belt. Everything is already on there, as in one pistol mag, one rifle mag, and a dump pouch. Or, like I mentioned before, all of these components just weave into the belt that you're already wearing. So if you are gonna go get a belt, they tend to be made very, very well. A lot of manufacturers are making belts with the idea that they need to be able to rappel out of a helicopter off the side of a mountain. So as far as durability, dude, if you go buy something used, it's gonna hold up, it's gonna be just fine. Or you save a little bit more money and you get a good leather belt and you just throw your attachments on there. So aside from belts, the next big debate, at least online, is should you go with a chest rig or a plate carrier of some kind first? Where do you land on that?
I personally don't think that debate will ever die. Like, there will, as long as the internet exists, people will argue between, whether or not you should get a plate carrier with armor or a chest rig first. We kind of fall into the category of both. And the way that we like to do that is to not blow all of our money on kind of like an assault style direct action rig like this, which if that's what you do, awesome. We love our direct action rigs like Spiritus plate carriers, which are actually very versatile and can actually cover a myriad of uses, or a Cry JPC. What I think would be a better use of your money if you're trying to get good enough in this category and you want to knock both of these out in one fell swoop is a slick plate carrier. A very just basic, it holds plates and that is it. Okay, it does the job of providing you armor. And then from there you get a chest rig that can go over it. This has been done for a long time. It's starting to come back in popularity, and for a very good reason, because it just gives you more versatility. You don't always have to wear your plate carrier, you don't always have to wear your chest rig and all of your ammo. You can split it up and go either way. So as far as where you spend your money, I would get an affordable slick rig and maybe spend a little bit more money on a quality chest rig.
So as a great example, one of our favorite slick plate carriers is the Cry MBAV, but they don't make them anymore. But then we figured out that Wetworks is doing a good quality plate carrier, the slick plate carrier. This comes in at about $130. And then as far as chest rigs, if you're a fan of split rigs, if you want something that's a traditional style, whatever it is that you're looking for, yeah, I would agree with Drew. Don't necessarily try and skimp and save your money on the chest rig, just because, dude, if you're putting that on, you're probably carrying a good amount of gear and you're probably up and down, dragging your chest across a lot of stuff, and you want to make sure that all of the gear is retained there. So this one from Velocity Systems, actually I believe it's Mayflower now. This one's about a $200 chest rig. You can buy them used. You can load it out and build it out the way that you want. This is actually not a large chest rig. This is still a fairly compact rig, but it's comfortable enough that I can be in it for 12 to 24 hours at a time and still work with what I need. Also keep in mind, when you're building pulling out something like this to still be able to throw a pack on the back. We've done a lot of other content on that, but if you're needing to scale up, you can. But this kind of system allows you to scale without being locked into this rig only does one thing for me, whereas a combination like this plus a Sustainment backpack gives me a lot of versatility.
As far as chest rigs go, if you are trying to save money, you know, a good old-fashioned TAPS rig that the Marine Corps has tested and proven for many years, you can get those used for cheap, like 50 bucks. And that rig will go well with you in whatever it is that you're doing. It's not the latest, it's not the fanciest, it's not the slickest, it's not the lightest, but it will get you good enough in the kit category. So affordable slick rig, chest rig, you're good to go. All right, headborne systems. We have bump helmets, we have ballistic helmets, we have night vision, there's also thermal.
Yep, so that's a whole nother conversation that people have been wrapped up in on the internet. Do I get a bump or a ballistic dual tubes? Do I need thermal? Here's where I boil it down just to make it as simple as possible. I would rather have a ballistic helmet and a PVS-14 than a bump helmet and dual tubes. But I would also rather have a bump helmet and night vision than ballistic and no night vision. So there's kind of these tiers. If you are getting anything for a helmet, night vision is the priority. Ballistic is nice. If you're spending all of your money on dual tubes and you just can't quite get ballistic, maybe reprioritize where that money is going. Now that's just my take. At the end of the day, I am not putting something like this or something like this on just for stargazing. I am buying this stuff to be able to, unfortunately, protect my family if things do ever get weird, and I'd like to be able to have ballistic protection even in the daytime. So a ballistic helmet and PVS-14 to me is good enough, or a PVS-14 and bump as opposed to no night vision at all.
Now for other people, myself included at times, I would rather have ballistic protection and say a thermal, okay, as opposed to a bump or even a ballistic with night vision. Now this is very user specific. You may have other priorities. Like I know there's a very good case to be made, and one that I tend to agree with a lot, that a ballistic helmet is far more important than having any kind of helmet with night vision on it. Starting with the ballistic, because it protects you, is a good idea. What I would say to that is, I don't disagree. However, whether or not you have a ballistic or a bump helmet, your training doesn't change. Whereas if you have night vision, that is something that you can be training in the meantime, in the in-between time of now and whatever horrible thing happens tomorrow. So if you know within like the next 1 to 2 years, you want to have a ballistic helmet with night vision, I would say go ahead and get a super cheap used bump helmet, put a PVS-14 on it. The moment you can afford, start training with it. The moment that you can afford a ballistic helmet, you swap it out. That's like the best play and the wisest use of your finances if you're trying to get to that good enough.
Beyond helmets, in headborne systems, there's another category that could be arguably far more important. So let me pull your ear a little bit in regards to gas masks. Let's say that it is past today. We're not talking about CS gas being deployed in your major city. We're talking about some form of societal breakdown, and it could even just be the electricity or the plumbing is out in your major town, and you know enough to dig a hole and go to the bathroom outside. You are not defecating in toilets that are overflowing, but you need to go trade food and water or help your grandma get out of her apartment complex, and everyone in the city does not have anywhere to go because the parks are filled, or they don't know to leave their apartment complex and they are defecating, there are animals dying, people are drinking bad water and they're getting super sick. The flies and now bacteria is growing. The buildings are starting to shut down because you don't have good airflow in the buildings, and everything is falling apart in literally just a matter of days. If you need to go into an area where there's a lot more people, bro, you better be putting a gas mask or at least some form of a filter over your mouth and your nose to protect yourself. Otherwise, you are seriously running the risk of picking up a lot of bad illnesses. Even EMTs and firefighters, when they go into a hoarder's house in the middle of a perfectly good city, they know to start putting masks on, because the stuff that is inside of those buildings that's been left for a period of time is going to be causing irreversible harm to your respiratory system or even to your vision. So, gas masks. Where do they land in the importance in comparison to helmets and night vision?
I would say that depending on where you live and what's around you, that can change. Like for us, we live in the middle of nowhere. There's actually not very much industry around us in terms of like plants that have chemicals in them. And if we are talking about a societal collapse, like inevitably people are not going to show up for work, buildings start to deteriorate, the things within them, like no one's checking for leaks or anything like that. Like it's very possible that areas around industrial manufacturing can be not necessarily uninhabitable, but not great to breathe in. So for us, I prefer a ballistic and night vision because I need to navigate out here in the middle of nowhere. But for most people, I would say a gas mask is actually far more important than having night vision and a ballistic helmet. And it's also cheaper by far. But in terms of price, gas masks are one of those areas that I do not skimp out on because I consider it a part of the medical family. And just like we talked about previously, anything medical related, I don't get budget. I don't get good enough. I go above and beyond. I pay whatever the price is because I don't mess around with that. I'm not a doctor, and developing that skill set would cost hundreds of thousands of dollars and another 10 years of my life, and I'm not gonna do that. But it's respiratory stuff. It has to do with your respiration, has to do with your eyes, and in that regard, like I'm sticking with Avon. They're the only like civilian accessible, NIOSH approved, US made gas mask company that has been tested and tried for many, many years in some of the worst places in the world. So that's why I go with Avon for that. As far as respirators go, you can go super cool, you can go super fancy, but if we are talking about employing this stuff all together, having something like the miters, which makes it easier to shoot with, and if you're not worried about the shooting and you're just worried about just getting around, like yeah, you can go and get an N95 mask from Home Depot, and that's good enough. Sustainment and survival gear, things like big rucks and all the things that go in them. Where does that fall into the priority list, and where can we get just good enough? Well, I've used some pretty cool rigs over the years, and there's certain ones that I prefer. However, I use a cheap used Gregory pack that was from REI. It was like a refurb from REI for many, many years. I mean, I've gone hundreds of miles on foot in some weird places in America, and it served me just as well as the fancy tactical stuff. I like the tactical stuff. I want, I'm really invested in that. I enjoy it, but just having a simple hiking backpack was good enough. Now, whenever it comes to sustainment, before you go all in, there's another major consideration.
Yeah, if you find yourself investing in a lot of gear that's for outside of the house. I have this amazing folding saw that costs a lot of money and it's made of titanium and it can fold up and go inside of my backpack. I have a water filtration system that's gonna be able to get me taken care of at a campsite. But again, you don't have any of those things taken care of for around the house and at home, then your priorities might be out of whack. Now, if based on where you live and if you're married or not, if you have kids or not, if your plan, if things get weird, is to leave the house, then yes, absolutely, having mobile tools for water, for food, for security, as well as being able to carry some of this stuff outside of a vehicle, great. But if you're like me and your plan is to just kind of hunker down and take care of things at home, all of this going out and doing recon and I need to have sustainment on my back, it's good, but it needs to come after you take care of all those things at home. So even things like, can you replace your back screen door to keep bugs and mosquitoes out from coming in? Do you have more of that mesh? Do you know how to replace one of those things? Do you know how to run a chainsaw? Do you know how to resharpen the chain blades? Do you know how to do the correct fuel mixture? Do you know how to collect water for yourself and your family? And if you don't have some of those things taken care of as far as sustainment and survival at home, and you're quick, again, we've done this before, so we're learning from ourselves, our past experiences, but if you're quick to jump onto, this is my go bag, this is my survival ruck, but you don't have any of those things at home, yes, you still have some of those tools, but man, it's so much nicer and it saves a lot of calories to have the correct tools at home as opposed to just what I can fit inside of my backpack.
Now, I will say that I think that being able to start a fire in the field, being able to source, procure, and purify and treat your water in the field, being able to create a shelter out of a cheap tarp or a cheap poncho, those are all survival skills that literally every dude should know. I think it's just like I think every young man should have a rite of passage, which is learning those things. So in that regard, survival and rucks and things like that are extremely important. I would even say probably more important than having a plate carrier or having a chest rig. Not more important than having your security figured out, but definitely higher on the priority list. And so whenever it comes to this whole thing is a conversation of priorities and when can I get that priority checked off good enough and move on to the next one and expand my capability overall. And then once I get everything covered, then start to pick one thing that I'm passionate about and start to go up a tier, right? That's what this is all about. So in terms of survival gear like this, definitely a priority, not the highest, not the lowest. And you can get good enough without buying the newest, fanciest thing that's set up to look super tactical. You can just get the basics. Basic fire starting kit, a cheap poncho, a cheap tarp, basic water filtration, and then move on to community and household tools like generators, chainsaws to clear roads around your house and to help your neighbors. Extra water cans to be able to transport that to a neighbor because you have plenty of water on hand. That's really the play. So to wrap all this up, what is one thing that you can remember as you go out and start to acquire gear? And that is spend where failure equals danger, save where failure equals discomfort.
And that may mean something a little bit different for you than it does for someone else. You may have kids, you may already own a home, you may live in a space where there's tornadoes or hurricanes. And for someone else, none of those things apply. So look at your own life and figure out the difference between danger and discomfort. Things like medical or ammunition in your concealed carry handgun, probably going to be danger areas for everyone. But some of those other niche topics, you really need to assess and figure that out for yourself. With that, guys, dad advice? Do you have any dad advice? Hit the sub button, it's free.
Oh yeah, I saw some dad advice on Instagram the other day, and it was, just because you're a dad and you're busy doesn't mean you shouldn't have time to work out, which I agree with. And the advice that was given was just work out before your kids wake up. Well, my kids wake up at 11 p.m., 12:30 a.m., 3 a.m., 3:30 a.m., 4:30 a.m., and 6 a.m. So there's plenty of windows to get a workout in.
Lots of time. They released Epstein documents level 1, and then they say, oh, nope, there was no one else involved, nothing to be seen here.
He's a part of the plan.
Yep.
I need $2 million for Baby Billy's Bible bunkers.